Hey everybody, this is Liam Martin from Running Remote, and in today's video we're going to be talking about something that it's really true and dear to my heart, and I've been thinking about this for quite a while. It's 3 separate options for returning to the office, quote unquote, post-COVID. You gotta choose one of those 3. You can't choose 2, you can't choose all 3, you gotta choose one, and we're gonna get into them, all the pros and cons. Let's do it. So if you're like me and pretty much half of the population on planet Earth that works inside of an office, you've been working remotely over the last year. And the reality is that a lot of this stuff has been just sort of like pushing on the outskirts of the consciousness of pretty much all business owners and HR department heads that I've spoken to over the last couple months, which is, what are we gonna do post-vaccine? Are we actually gonna go back to the office? Are we not gonna go back to the office? And it really boils down to 3 core kind of directions. Direction number 1 is you wanna stay remote, which approximately 84% of workers want to do and about 74% of employers wanna do. There's the second option, which is everyone goes right back into the office, completely back in there, and you're just operating like you were before COVID even happened. And then option 3 is a hybrid working model. So between those 3, we're gonna be breaking those down today in this video, all the pros and cons that I see, and which direction you should really take as a business owner in your own company, because this is probably gonna be one of the most important business decisions that you make in the next couple years as to whether or not you want to embrace a more remote work style or if you want to go back directly inside of the office. So the first option is staying remote. And before we even get into this stuff, I gotta tell you, I'm a little biased on this one. You know, this channel is called Running Remote. We run a conference on remote work. We have employees in 43 different countries all over the world. I have been remote working for 15 years. So I'm a little biased to hold remote work thing, but I'm trying to think about this in your head, right? Which is just someone who's relatively new to remote work, maybe, who's thinking to themselves, do we go back to this remote work life or do we go back to something different? So first one is staying remote. The first pro, which I can't touch on more than I already have in like literally 12 other videos that I have on this YouTube channel, is the financial savings. So when you go remote, on average, you're going to probably cut your equipment and HR costs by about 60% on average. So that means you don't actually have to buy people a desk, a computer, a big, huge monitor. You don't have to get them an office. You don't have to heat those offices. There's no utilities. There's no office manager. There's no free cookies. There's no beer. There's no coffee, right? And you can do those in different ways, actually, for your remote workers in much more efficient ways. I have videos about that in this video, but that's the biggest thing that you could possibly think of is massive financial savings as it applies to your business. The other part that's really important when you look at a remote work agreement and just going completely remote, what we call remote first companies, is you're going to be able to get access to talent that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to even get close to if you're restricting yourself to a particular city, state, or country. And that's the reality that we've experienced at our company for the last 15 years. We hire people from 43 different countries all over planet Earth. So we're able to bring in the best talent regardless of their location or how they work. And this has been one of our biggest strategic opportunities over the last couple of years. And there's a ton of remote first companies that do exactly the same thing that we're doing. Now, unfortunately, that advantage is probably not going to be as advantageous moving into the future because there's a bunch of other companies that are trying to do it as well. But the reality is if you're just restricting yourself to one particular location, you're probably not going to be able to take advantage of these types of labor opportunities. If you can't get access to these types of labor opportunities, it's going to be so difficult for you moving forward to be able to get that top tier talent because they're going to recognize that they want to actually continue to work remotely, particularly for like the top 1-2% of the workforce. So you're not really going to be able to get access to those people on a continuous basis. And that's my biggest fear for people right now that are looking at going back to the office full time. So I have some cons for remote first models as well. They come with cons just as much as pros. The first one is cultural engagement. There's a big problem when it comes to remote first teams. There's a very special way of running a kind of like company culture when you're talking about a remote first company. It requires a very different type of engagement than when someone is inside of an office, because there's an accepted sort of collaboration that occurs inside of a physical space, right? It's just like, hey Bob, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great, John. Cool. What happened on the weekend? That type of stuff doesn't happen, or it needs to be more forced inside of remote first organizations, which leads to my second big con when it comes to remote first organizations, which is collaboration. So a lot of teams that are currently going remote right now, they have huge collaboration issues because they're not recognizing how to manage remote first organizations effectively. We have this terminology which we like to call asynchronous management, which is the ability to be able to basically record and document everything that's communicated inside of an organization, where they are in the world, or whether they're currently working right now, or they're sick, or anything like that. Remote first organizations that did this before the pandemic, I mean, they just recognized this as a core way to work. And on-premise companies, i.e. people inside of an office, they accept that this is always kind of happening because you can just talk to Bob or Jim or Suzanne or whoever it might be about whether or not the T28 forms are submitted properly. You just go over and talk to them. Inside of remote teams, that's a lot more difficult, and collaboration definitely is impacted if you're not using asynchronous management philosophy to build up a more effective kind of team culture and sense of collaboration. If you're interested in videos about asynchronous management, just check out the YouTube channel. We've got tons of stuff. And while you're there, you should probably subscribe to this YouTube channel too. I always forget to say subscribe to the YouTube channel. Did you know that 89% of you are not subscribed to this YouTube channel? That makes me sad, frankly, because like I'm making videos left, right, and center here, and it's, you know, give a guy a couple subs. I'd really appreciate it. So next one is actually returning completely to the office, what we actually call a on-premise model, meaning everyone is on a premises. Like it's kind of like what servers used to be before we had cloud computing. You just set up a bunch of servers in one particular place. That's on-premise versus remote first, which is kind of like cloud labor effectively. So on-premise teams have a lot of advantages and a lot of disadvantages, and we're gonna break them down. First con that we have is cost per person goes way up, effectively triple what you have in remote first teams. And this is something that we've encountered consistently inside of our organization, and it's really been kind of the magic strategic advantage that we've had inside of the market, which is we're able to hire people in locations that are more cost effective, number one, but more importantly, we don't necessarily have to pay for all of the offices and desks and cameras and microphones and all that other junk that you actually need inside of your office to be able to run effectively. So you're saving all those costs, and that's just one of the hugest advantages to a remote first organization. Also, you're probably going to lose your best talent over the next few months if you go back to an on-premise model and all of the people go back to the office. A lot of people that are really good at their jobs, they always have other jobs. I call them like A and B players. A players are just like, why would I want to work at your company? I have 10 other offers. And B players are, can I please get a job and work at your company? You really want as many A players as humanly possible, and frankly, as few B players as humanly possible inside of your organization. So whenever you look at remote work and the future that it's going to kind of like produce over the next couple years, the genie is fundamentally out of the bottle. There's gonna be a lot more companies that are gonna offer remote work agreements just as table stakes. So it's important for you to be able to recognize that and provide that type of opportunity to your staff. If you're forcing them to go back inside of the office, this may not be the best situation long term. Another big con for the office is you'll be cut off from international talent opportunities, or those opportunities will be so expensive to bring into your office, it won't actually be worth it. I know for us, we've hired people that have gotten like a top 10 finish at at the Facebook hackathon. They've gotten offers from Facebook and Google and Microsoft. And the reason why they ended up working with us is because they could work remotely. They could stay in the location that they were in, even though we couldn't offer them the same salary that those types of companies would, but they'd have to actually like move to San Francisco. Those people are really amazing pieces of like resource talent that you need to be able to take advantage of if you're planning on building a large team. And this is only going to get worse as these things continue on, because fundamentally, as I said before, there's a lot more companies that are going to be offering remote work agreements than there were before. So pros to going back to the office is you're back in the office. So, you know, you've got that as an advantage. I guess you can like go to Starbucks and drink $8 coffee if you want, but maybe you'll have a more focused sense of company culture. But honestly, a recent poll by Dell showed that 84% of workers said they prefer to actually be remote in the long term. So you'll probably lose a lot of your good talent to good workers that can find remote positions elsewhere. Literally just yesterday, I got this comment from Aaron, a subscriber, I hope actually a subscriber to this channel. He said, I recently left my job where I worked for over a decade to take a remote position. My former employer refused to acknowledge the benefits of a remote work option, even after staff demonstrated this during the pandemic over the course of several months, and that they were able to only meet expectations, but in fact exceeded them. All staff were forced to return to the office as soon as our state lifted restrictions within 14 days. I had seen enough to be convinced that it was time to go. A week later, I had a job offer with another company, one operating as a fully remote workforce. I've never been happier or more productive at a job than I have been since I started this one. You don't want to lose your errands. You want to actually make sure that you're taking advantage of those types of opportunities, because having the top 5% of your talent pool leave you because you don't have a remote work agreement, I think it's honestly going to blow the tires out of a ton of companies moving forward. The last option, which is the option that I think most people are going to take, is the hybrid work option, or the hybrid office. As I said, probably what the majority of companies will go to, and I think it's probably the worst option out of the three ways going forward. So hybrid is where some of your team is remote and some is in the office. Lots of companies are doing this, like Facebook and Salesforce, but companies like Shopify, as an example, realized this is probably a horrible idea for some of the following reasons. One of the worst cons is the lack of impact for remote workers. A lot of remote workers in hybrid setups see themselves as second-class workers because they aren't able to work with decision makers face-to-face. Another big con is if you haven't adopted an asynchronous management philosophy, a lot of the communication that happens inside of the office will never get to the remote workers, and they won't be able to work as quickly in comparison to an asynchronous company where everything is documented and digitized. I've been trying to think of some pros of hybrid teams, but I think you get all of the problems with higher overhead costs for staff, coupled with the best talent leaving and still not getting the actual collaborative advantages you were looking for inside of an on-premise team. So in my professional opinion, I would personally be pretty beware. What I'm suggesting to people is, why don't you actually start with asking your employees? Do they want to go back to the office? How many have actually left the city you're actually working out of and never plan on coming back? Do they feel more or less productive working remotely? Make the survey anonymous, and I'd love to hear what results you get. Throw them down below and I'll continue the conversation down there. And while you're down there, you might as well subscribe to this YouTube channel. As I said, it's totally free, and we talk about this kind of stuff all day long. Also, if you have any questions about hybrid work, on-premise work, remote first work, put them down below. I'd love to know, what are you planning on doing? Are you gonna go back to the office, not back to the office, or somewhere in between? Put them down below. See you in the next video.